Okay, so let's do some more examples on here to make sure you guys understand what you are doing. Also, by the way, another thing wrong with the previous one is it has typos and errors in it. It's not very well written. Many say the main theme in this novel is to show the extent a modern bureaucracy with madness of totalitarianism control our lives. Um, that's just incorrect grammar. So you don't want to quote that. This is not an expert. Okay, looking good. Also, it's too short. It's too short. You got to read a couple of paragraphs to get a sentence. This is way too short. Okay, let's try another one. Now the next one is a tricky one because my students like the next one, but there's something fucking wrong with it. There's a couple of things wrong with it actually. So let's take a look at this one. Brainyquote.com. This is no, you may not quote this. So let's find out why. So for starters, here's a quote. Robert Frost, a poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom. So let's say you wanted to quote that. A poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom um, on brainyquote.com. So the question becomes, can you quote that? There's about 5 different reasons why no, you cannot. So see if you can spot the reasons why you cannot quote that. A couple of seconds here and you guys can think about it. So let's start with this. Number one, advertising. That's not great. I feel like advertising makes this less good. Okay. Number two, is this guy an expert? Well, if you look up Robert Frost, it turns out, yes, he is an expert. He's one of the most famous poets that ever lived. He's a great poet. So that seems good. You got a quote from an expert. But here's the problem. What book is that from? Brainy Quote doesn't tell you. Here's another problem. This is too short. It's just one sentence. I told you guys you had to read a couple of paragraphs. This is just one sentence. Now, I suppose you could find out what book this is from, and you could read the paragraph before and the paragraph that it's in and the paragraph after to make sure it's good. But right here, this is not enough. The quote doesn't have any context. There's no surrounding material, so it's not good. Here's another thing why you can't quote it. A poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom, meaning you start by enjoying yourself when you read poetry, but you actually become smarter. This is not a good quote because it's about all poems everywhere. And your paper is about a specific thing, like it's about one poem or one play or something. So it's too general. One of the ways you can tell something is not worth quoting is if any student could put it in any paper, don't quote it. It's stupid because it just relates to too much stuff. So that is not a good one and is not going to work. Okay, cool. Because it doesn't relate, you need something connected to your paper. And a statement about how all poems everywhere, unless you're writing a paper about all poems everywhere, and this is only a 1,000 word paper, so do not do that, don't quote that guy. Okay, let's do another one. How about Wikipedia? Now, Wikipedia has a whole section here on Macbeth and other plays. You could look up The Tempest on Wikipedia and find out about it. So the question is, can you quote Wikipedia? Most of you guys know, no, you can't. Now, here's the fucked up thing. Wikipedia is great. I love Wikipedia. I look shit up on Wikipedia all the time. I was cooking something the other day using black garlic, and I was like, what the fuck is black garlic? So I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it told me, and I bet that it's right. The problem with Wikipedia, there's a couple of problems with Wikipedia. Number one, remember how I said you have to know who you're quoting, the name of the person? Wikipedia is not written by a person. It's written by hundreds of people, and there's no way to check if they're all experts. It's too time consuming. So that's one reason why you can't quote Wikipedia. There's not a name attached to it, an individual's name. The other reason why you can't quote Wikipedia, and I do hate to tell you this, it's too simple. Now, when you look at Wikipedia, it will tell you all about, if you want to find out about Othello or The Tempest or Metamorphosis or Kafka, it'll tell you all about those things. But it's too simple. It's like high school level shit. It'll tell you basic stuff about the ideas in the play or about what happens in the play or a summary of the play. But it's really a pretty high school level thing. And here's the thing. It is perfectly okay with me if you want to use Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia all the time. I'm like some Shakespeare character. I'm like, I don't even remember what fucking play they're in, and I look it up and I look it up on Wikipedia, and I'm like, oh, that's what play this guy's from. Wikipedia is great if you want to use it to understand books better, but that doesn't mean you can quote it as research. So perfectly okay thing for you to read on your own to help your own basic understanding, but the quotes in your paper have to be more complicated than that. It's too simple. Okay. There are footnotes, by the way, at the bottom of a Wikipedia article. A lot of those footnotes will take you to trustworthy sources. So you could go to Wikipedia and scroll down the bottom and click on something and see if you can get to something trustworthy. Okay, let's try another one. Here is Sparknotes.com. Are you allowed to quote this in your paper? Again, I hope you're noticing the same problems. We've got advertising. That's not great. We've got an idea about themes and motifs and symbols. Themes are ideas and symbols are metaphors. So that seems pretty good. But once again, it's the same problem with Wikipedia. It's too simple. It's for high school students. If you're confused about what's going on in a book, please go to Sparknotes, look it up. It can help you understand what's going on. If you're confused about what's going on in The Tempest, perfectly good idea to read it. But it's not worth quoting as research. It's not good enough to be. It's good enough to help you, but it's not good enough to be research in a college paper. So I'm not telling you to stay away from Sparknotes. Please go check it out. It'll help you out. But it's not good enough to be research in a college paper. Also, you will notice Sparknotes, there's no author listed. So that's not so good. Okay, let's try something else. And here we get into a tricky zone. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Now, some of you guys have read that book or a book like it in high school or something. Can you quote Animal Farm by George Orwell as research? This confuses the shit out of my students. It's very important that we think about this. The answer is no, you can't. And it's tricky to understand why. It's a book, an important book, written by a very famous author who is, he's an expert. He's a very famous guy. He knows what he's doing. Why can't you quote Animal Farm in your research paper, right? Well, here's the problem with Animal Farm. It's about talking animals. Now, it's a great fucking book. It's such a good book. Very, very good book. But it's about talking animals. It's not real. Research, remember the definition of research from way back at the beginning of this video? Research has to be an expert opinion or an unusual fact. Well, here's the problem. Animal Farm is a novel, which means it's not opinion and it's not fact, it's fiction. That's a totally other thing. So you can't quote it. One time I had a student who was writing a paper about Batman. He was comparing Batman to a Shakespeare character. Fun paper. And then he did his research and he said, guess, I said, what kind of research did you come up with? And the student said, okay, here's what I found out. Did you know that the Gotham City subway train was invented by Batman's father? Now, that is a piece of information most people don't know, but it's not research because Thomas Wayne, Batman's dad, is not a real person. He's a fictional person. So it's not research because it's not an expert opinion and it's not a fact. It's more fiction. Now, it's fiction my student didn't know about until he did the research, but it's not research because research is opinion and fact. Fiction can't be research. Okay. A character in a book, by the way, might have an opinion that is interesting and you might want to quote it, but they're not an expert because they're not real. Okay. And then there's this. Oh God, I don't even want to talk about this. Can you quote the Bible? Well, I have no idea is the short answer. Some parts of the Bible are stories about talking snakes. So that seems more like fiction, although believers obviously don't think it's fiction. They think it's real because that's how God made the universe. Some parts of the Bible also are like ethical advice from Jesus. Maybe you could quote that. I guess you could say Jesus is like an expert ethical teacher. But the quoting the Bible, which my students like to do because it's one of the only books they know, raises all kinds of messy problems. Here's the main reason why you can't quote the Bible. Even though there are things in it that are really good, and even though there are things in it that are maybe worth quoting, if you can quote Plato and Socrates, you should probably be able to quote Jesus. They're both experts on ethics. The problem with the Bible is that for a lot of people, the Bible is real, and for a lot of other people, the Bible is just a collection of fictional stories. When you quote it in your paper is supposed to be for everybody. But if you quote the Bible like it's true, your paper is no longer for everybody, it's only for Christians, and that's not how you write papers for college. I suppose you could write paper that was like, some people believe this, and then you could have a paragraph where other people might disagree. But the point is, stay away from the Bible, it's too complicated. All right, we're looking good. Okay, and then we have one more thing here, and you can see here, this is an article from the Harvard Law Review, and it is published by JSTOR.org, Trusted Archives for Scholarship, and we've got an essay here by Robin West. If you look up Robin West, they are an expert, and yes, that is actually worth quoting in a college paper. Okay, cool. So I think you now have a sense of how to do research. And by the way, the last thing I'm going to tell you about doing research is go to Google search Google quote, Google Scholar, unquote, and click on it. And it will take you to something that looks just like Google, but will bring you scholarship stuff, like scholarly things, college things. It's a much better way to do research. You'll find better things using Google Scholar. Um, it's scholar.google.com, and that'll help you find things. And that ends the lesson on research. And it also is sort of the end of videos that have something to do with your grade. I will be returning to talk to you guys about kind of concluding the class and saying goodbye, but that won't affect any of your papers. So what I will say to you now is just, you know, do your papers and I'll, any questions. If you have any questions, please ask them. Either email me the questions or put the questions in the comments of the blog. I know some of you guys are getting your comments deleted. Just email them to me if you're having trouble with that. But ask the questions at the bottom of this blog or online, and good luck with your 4 papers: Kafka, Othello, Tempest, and this final research paper. Okay, and everything's due on like May 14th, and there'll be some information on the blog coming up that'll remind you about all those deadlines. All right, cool. See you next time.